I'm just talking in a room with all my friends. Love it. Thanks you guys for coming. Mahalo nui for, with all of the choices, I feel really honored that you chose to take a little bit of time to hang out with me in this room to talk about ali'i. Right from the very beginning, I kind of want to acknowledge that the main point of this talk is to focus on really the brilliance of our kupuna. And we know, of course, how brilliant they are. In so very many ways, we're aware of that. In one of the ways that I see that they have exceeded so many peoples around the world has to do with leadership and the kinds of strategies and brilliance involved in this sense of kuali'i, being a li'i. So that's really what the talk is about. I'm going to be kind of fast forwarding through a bunch of things really quickly. Up on the board, you can't see it because it's really, really tiny and it's printed at way smaller than it's supposed to be printed. These are a whole lot of the chiefs that can be represented in this time span of some 50 generations. From Kuhinapapa to this period where the red line starts. These are sort of all the cosmogonic genealogies, beginnings of everything. And then when you get to this part here, this red zone is where my talk is going to be focusing on. The histories and the way that the mo'olelo and the mo'oku'auhau, the way that they're talked about shifts. And we have a real strong sense of there being history as we think of it today, like lots of details about this person and where they were born and where their iebe was buried and their mereinoa and all of the great feats of their lives and who they married and who else they married and who else they married and all of their keiki. And it starts to become really, really detailed. And it's in this detailed area that we are able to glean so much about what it really means to be a li'i. And this kind of captures a little bit of the sense of the time depth that we're looking at. I'm passing around a thingy back there. And here's a little bit longer one. But this era spans some 23 generations. So the beginning of these guys are people like Pili Ka'aea on Hawaii Island. So this column is Hawaii Island. Paumakua on Maui. Maveke on Oahu, these are some famous names you probably have heard of, yeah? The Puna family who will be married into Mo'ikeha by the third generation of this ka'ina on Kauai. And if you go all the way down, you see really there are many, many, many chiefs that are included in that red zone. And on the very bottom of this is someone that we typically think of as, from Wakahiko. But really, he's not Wakahiko. He's really wild, just like yesterday kind, and that's Kamehameha. Yeah. So that just to contextualize sort of where we are, what we're doing. Come up, you guys. Oh, okay, so back there. And where we're getting this from are kaka'olelo. Kahuna really of mo'olelo that were saved by the court, mo'oku'auhau, they were professionals in their time. They would have trained from keiki to opio to makua, and by the time they got to that age of being kupuna, they would have had accumulated in their minds all that you see there. This was their job. They have to remember, and you guys up here can get a greater appreciation, but that was their role. Yeah, imagine PhD times 5. They had to memorize all of these people, what their relationships were, their multiple relationships, how those relationships interconnected with one another. And not just that, but then what happened in their lives, because they had to share with their ali'i what were the best examples of what worked and what didn't work, and use that history to learn from. As we know, always look Kua mamua, how are they facing? That wa mamua is in the past. as, yeah? And we remember that, yeah? So they have to always look at that as a reference point. And so these folks were the ones who kept that knowledge. And what's significant about that is that, you know, as we hear from people like Kū'oko'a and others who have worked with the Kuhinapapa, they saved it for us. You know, somehow, miraculously, so much of this in the 1800s and prior really were saved so that we would have it. And kind of what's neat about this is that, you know, it's still revealing itself to us, much like the Kuhinapapa are still revealing. All those articles are still revealing themselves to us. These mele and mo'olelo and mo'oku'auhau have much more to share. Typically, how we've been looking at it through time is to look at just one mo'olelo. And we dive into that one mo'olelo and we say, wow, there's such richness in this mo'olelo, or in this mele, or in this one genealogy. But what's really cool is that when you start putting them together, you start to see, oh, wow, there's some connection. You can fit these together. And then when you start really looking at a wider span, whole new patterns emerge. And when you see these other patterns emerging, that's what I'm talking about, that brilliance of our kupuna. And it's kind of brilliance that those kahuna who captured all of those mo'olelo and mo'oku'auhau were able to have in their minds and share with the ruling chiefs of the time to guide their behaviors. So, just going to catch a glimpse of that. Just to emphasize this point. This sense of kuali'i, being a li'i, standing in all of that which is the best ideals of being an li'i. It's really one of the features of hallmarks of our people. Just like we think of these as hallmarks of our people, yeah? All of these high points of what we excelled in and what we can stand very proudly in talking about. Kuali'i is one of those. And we don't always add that to the ka'ina when we talk about, oh yeah, and our kupuna were, you know, excelled in feather work and excelled in hula, and our agricultural complexes were like none other, and da-da-da. Chiefly behaviors were, to me, of the same sort. It's amazing. I want to pause right now since we have a first time to really take a look at this. These are the artwork of Kapu Kuniahi Parker. I just want to acknowledge how awesome his artwork is, and that we borrowed these to use for this presentation. Mahalo as well to my publishing to let me use these because they officially belong to. Anyway, this is a quick picture that captures a lot of what we think about when we talk about a li'i. Oftentimes we just kind of, like in that sporadic, you know, this triangle and that triangle and that triangle, we have these images of what are good a li'i, this one and that one and this one. So we know a li'i, of course, helped to balance that sense of centralized authority and local autonomy. We know there were layers of a li'i where the konahiki of this area had that localized governance, that, you know, real in touch with the people, in touch with the land there, and then there was the overall centralized authority that kind of kept everything in order, checks and balances on both of them, and that allowed for a lot of productivity at a really, really high level. So, for instance, in this image, we see that there's an awai system and there's a whole agricultural complex. Well, it's something that any one ohana couldn't do by itself. Yeah, you had to have some sort of organizing body that brings in some expertise that allows, and authority that allows everybody to kind of organize and figure out how are we going to make this work. So this is one of those kinds of things that, yeah, we know about. This is part of what it means to be kuali'i, to have that organizational framework. We see it in real life here. Imagine if Waikiki still looked like this. That'd be awesome because it's one of the most productive food creation pieces. Super abundant, one of our items. It's the legacy at this time, you know, when it was at this heyday, when there were lo'i and lo'i and lo'i for days. Kalia, where the Hilton is, was fish ponds for days. It was the most productive area on Oahu. And it became productive because of the works of Ma'ili Kukahi, Kalamakua, Kuhinapapa. They're the ones whose administrations were able to bring these lands to full productivity. That kind of abundance that we think about really couldn't have occurred without ali'i being involved. And when I talk about chiefs, please know that when I say Ma'ili Kukahi, it's really shorthand for Ma'ili Kukahi Ma, his whole administration. As you know, common sense, and as we can well know, any one chief is not doing this by him or herself. You know, there's a whole body of people who are working together under that one chief. The kind of productivity that we saw in Kona and Kohala would have been beyond any of our imaginations. This one area is, I don't know if you guys can see all those kind of a grid-like pattern. This is a Walla field system in North Kohala. And by itself, just this portion, we're not even talking the Kona portion, because the Kona portion would have been much, much bigger, but just this portion alone is 12 miles long by 2.5 miles wide. It's crazy big. The amount of food that would have been produced by this is just mind-boggling. Again, not the kind of thing that any one ohana or any 15 ohana could have figured out how to do without some sort of organizing framework. So a lot of, again, emphasizing the point, a lot of what we know that we just marvel at had to do with the fact that we did have leaders who knew what they were doing. Leaders who were very humble, too. On purpose, they would walk around incognito. I think you guys can nonetheless imagine who Brooke's picturing there, yeah? You really nailed the features, yeah? Mm-hmm. So here's Kamehameha going up from Kū'oko'a. There's a need to haul a whole lot of things up, so how far is this, or almost that, and he's talking story with this puna, trying to get the deal on, how are the chiefs of this area? You guys like them? What's up with that? Tutu doesn't seem to know who's talking to him, but I think Keiki kind of has it. Our chiefs, they defended their people. Yeah, this is Kiha Pi'ilani in the foreground. Kiha Pi'ilani battled against Lona Pi'ilani on Maui to bring back the island of Maui under kind of more pono rule. As it was said, Lona Pi'ilani wasn't the greatest of chiefs, so the younger brother Kiha sought help from Umi, and together they took over the island of Maui. Umi is on Hawaii Island at the time. Key in this, as I'm going to try to highlight these points today. Oh my goodness, so nice to see all of these old friends in this room. Love it. So Umi, highlighting for us as Wahine, would never have been in the picture. I mean, Kiha would never have been able to do what he did if not but for Kiha's sister, Pi'ikea. And you will find throughout many a mo'olelo that it is the female who plays that pivotal role. And surely that female's decision to take that stance and to influence the situation in the way she did made all the difference in the world. So Pi'ikea, who is kind of purposefully married to Umi on Hawaii Island, having heard what's going on Maui, having heard the pleas of Kiha for assistance, weighs in and gets that assistance from Umi. So again, the main point here, I'm kind of just going over various triangles, remember in that first thing, and not really pulling together some of the big picture stuff, but just some of the high-level stuff. We know that our ali'i defended our people when time was necessary. Where are these men today? Oh, you guys should see the one coming up. So, physical prowess. Yeah, it did matter. The sort of olakino maika'i mauliola. and mattered. You couldn't be a chief if you couldn't be out there on the front line battling or, helping to build a heiau or helping to break open the ground for a new lo'i. You have to have that physical prowess. It was balanced with this sense of appreciation of arts, yeah? And here we have Kuhiheva's home at Alele in Kailua. Pamoa was the name of his area where he hosted lavishly chiefs from all the other islands. So this is a ho'okipa. Lonei Kamakahiki was one of his most famed guests, and they had all sorts of wonderful exploits of Suada and Kakuheva and Lonei Kamakahiki. More traits. Keeping in the zone of the arts, we think about a chief like this, Keawiki Kahili Iokamoku and his Wahine Lonoma'ai Kanaka, and the child in his arms there. And you can imagine what's going on here, yeah? Who's this child and what's happening in this picture? Well, the child is Kaleninu Ia Mamau. And what's being chanted at this time is a kumulipo. So a lot of the arts that we extol today may never have come to be without the patronage of our ali'i. It was these ali'i who employed, so to speak, who took care of these poets of the time so that they didn't have to worry about where their food was coming from. They didn't have to worry about how their hale was going to be built. All they had to concentrate on was creating incredible works of art like the kumulipo. And here we have it coming together at the birth of Kaleninu Ia Mamau. Another key trait of ali'i is the fact that they had a strong core of advisors, and another larger core and a larger core. They always looked to others around them for expertise. They never ruled alone. They knew when it was better to call upon this person, because they don't know about how to make a uala field system, right? They themselves, but call upon that expertise, empower that person, let that person guide. And so the sense of an ali'i being among other ali'i is really the point of this picture, that's a key factor. You never hear about an ali'i without stories of what's going on in the aha'ula, that core, or the ahali'i, that larger group of ali'i who were part of the leadership. Okay, now kind of switching gears. So we kind of got a little bit of flavor of the sense of huali'i. I'm going to try and take things sort of in broad strokes through this timeline from that period of Mavekema and Pirima down to here. So the first story, kind of so to speak, bringing together different mo'olelo, bringing together of those triangles to try and see a bigger picture, a bigger pattern. Let's look at this early period. So what's happening, it's in this later migratory period. We have chiefs coming from Kahiki, meaning kind of Central East Polynesia. All of those islands are really probably involved, whether they be the Society Islands, the Marquesas Islands, the Cook Islands. They're coming up from these areas, even like the Samoa Islands. And there are two major lineages that are involved. The Nanaulu guys and the Ulu guys. Ulu are the senior, Nanaulu the junior, but the key kind of interesting thing here is that it's the Nanaulu line that gets here first. So in terms of seniority, there are two kinds of seniority that's involved. Seniority by virtue of who arrived first, and seniority by virtue of genealogy, both of which count. And so it gets to be a little bit difficult because you have some problems arising where you have lots of the younger ali'i, and now this has gone on for generations, right? They've been coming to Hawaii for generations. It's not like one episode of arrival, yeah? So generations, and now all of those easy prime lands to go to, like a Waipiko or something like, not that that would be easy, but it's really primo, where you have water, you have flat land, you can go for it real quick, you can figure it out pretty easily, well, comparatively speaking. But now they're needing to kind of figure out, okay, how do we spread ourselves out on this aina and not bump into each other? What's becoming clear at this point is that there's not that Kū'oko'a, that sense of understanding among all of them as to how rulership is going to work. Because the image we have, the last image, and I kind of did that on purpose with Kamehameha and Akula, it's very much an evolved innovation that gets refined over time. But at this point, none of that exists. There isn't even a feathered king that has been invented yet. All of these things haven't come to be. And so that foundation, that kahua of what governance means, that Kū'oko'a has not been laid out yet. The lines of authority have been blurred because a lot of the chiefly folks have been marrying makaimana. And so there's sort of that sense of who's who in terms of who's ruling. And there's no accountability among the different chiefs. Yeah? Because there's not that head person that's emerged. Without that accountability among chiefs, there's also it's harder for there to be accountability between ali'i and makainana. Because who's gonna call out the guy over here who's not treating his makainana well? Because who has authority over this guy, yeah? So there's instability and a lot of angst at this point. So keep in mind this angst too, yeah? You have kind of two seniorities. Who's gonna come up on top? Well, enter in the guys who built this. Anybody recognize? Where are we? Kohala. Yeah, it was Wahine. So to give you an appreciation of what the helicopter is seeing here, at the base of these walls, the widest walls are around here, yeah? 30 feet wide. The height of that wall over there is about 20 feet high. And I know most of us haven't had a chance to enjoy the opportunity to play pohaku and make, these kinds of things, but this is an incredible, incredible amount of labor. And imagine that they're carried from as far as Honolulu, which as the Eva might fly is, actually that area would be more like an eel. An eel would fly is, okay, let me get this right. Over 10 miles away. And the terrain is like this, up and down and up and down and up and down. Okay, so what does AL have to do with the question I just posed about how do we get everything organized and working cohesively and some sort of order being established? Well, okay, in this story, the person who arrives, who is going to end up building this, is Pa'ao. Pa'ao is a kahuna, yeah? And he comes to Tiki and he says, okay, wait, what is going on here? We have to have really pure chiefs established in a position of authority. I'm going to go back to Kaiki, bring back Pilika'aea, and we're going to set things up. So they come from the Ulu lineage, yeah? Later arrivals, but senior. So when they arrive on the scene, they say, okay, here's how we're going to do it. They quickly adopt this invention, so to speak. Haho, at the time on Maui, had this brilliant idea, also at Uluchi, to bring together all the chiefs of the island and establish what we think of today as the ahali, wherein there is an understanding through everyone's genealogies who is the highest ranking and on down. Pa'ao and Pili immediately established that. They also established the notion that they're going to have real clear accountability among the chiefs to one another, to Makainanga. And it's that second one that becomes super important, and it's probably that second one that made possible their getting the cooperation of everyone between here. Yeah, this is way, way out where it's already that Kohala Bajo area where it's dry. Yeah, and from that point all the way to Pololu. Yeah, many, many Apupua'a. Lots and lots of areas in between, lots and lots of people would have been carrying these pohaku all the way from Pololu to here. What does that say? What would it have taken to create this?
People.
Organization.
Organization.
Loyalty.
Leadership.
Reliance.
Food. And this is what Pa'au and Pili were instituting. So they set it up in place, and this was the best way to illustrate it to any onlookers. We have our act together. We have an organizational structure. We have localized kind of ways of figuring out things. We have centralized ways of figuring out things. Because imagine just feeding a crew, right? How hard would it be just to set up that? How hard would it be to have everybody lining up and passing all those pa'aku for 10 miles over terrain that looks like this? So when the Nana'ulu chiefs on the island take a look at this, if you were a Nana'ulu chief, would you want to buck the assertion of these guys of their standing and their ability to rule this region? I wouldn't either, right? Because they have their act together. And first and foremost, above all, where is that energy focusing? Where are they putting their energy? On their relationship with their akua. Whoa, add that to the mix. I don't think I want to stir with these guys. And so this new way of sort of organizing things becomes the order of the day, and it's really coming out of this era. Heiau building from here on will become one of those notable activities whenever there's strife. And so we often think of, I think, it in oversimplified terms, that this heiau were built, as a prelude to war. They're getting ready for war, and it's all, testosterone kind of war. Heiau are actually a lot about avoiding war. And Kū'oko'a is as much an akua of stability of government as he is of war when you need to go there too. So, different way of thinking about heiau, yeah? Same thing with Pu'ukohala, yeah, later. So again, the chiefs are always, that ahali'i, they're always looking to examples of the past, what works. So it's no accident that in these times when there is kind of strife and a buying of factions, heiau get built. It's your way of showing your opponent what you can do. Okay. Now this is really weird. I know we normally don't think of graphs and stuff like that. Huh? We're talking about ali'i. She's busting out graphs. What is this about? Okie dokie. So, because you're going to see a bunch of these coming up. There's, if you read through the mo'olelo, so read, there ends up standing out certain ali'i that are clearly like, whoa, big, like 9 out of 10 kind of, or 10 out of 10. They really come out as shining examples. And you can hear it in the narratives. And not just from one narrative, but many narratives. And so this is a totally subjective way of me charting. Okay, we started at 1 with Mobeke, generation 1 of that red line area. For those of you who were here at the beginning, there's that one zone in that timeline that I'm really focusing on. If 1 is Mobeke, 23 is Kamehameha, and we're looking at all the different main island ahali'i. These are sort of the number of chiefs that will really pop out as superior. What's interesting about this, and as a point of reference, okay, so somebody like Riloa is at 13. kind of give you some sense of timing. You want to get a little person. Colonially, Ohua would be like 6. Yeah? This, when you look at this, let me let you guys just kind of soak it in for a little bit. So external aggression, the gray bars, when someone's going outside to another island and waging war. Internal, it's happening within that island, within that chief's area. Now, when we hear about our history, what part of this timeline from generation 1 to 23 do we normally hear about? Yeah, right in here. And it's no wonder then that we have these stereotypes of our chiefs being largely about warfare and revenge and but if you look at the time of Liloa, Umi, and all of those guys, Nona Pi'ilani, Kuhinapapa, it's a different picture here. So what's going on? What happened? What kicked off all of this warfare? Well, remember Kū'oko'a talking about how there was this one mo'olelo that if any of the mo'olelo of chiefs a child should know, and of course he has a Hawaiian advice, it's the story of Umi. And the more I looked at the situation, the more I could see why. This is what I was talking about. Okay, so Umi front center, his father, Liloa in the foreground, and Umi's 3 hanai keiki, Pi'imai Wa'a, Umakomau, and Koi. So what's with his story and how is it related to that set of gray bars and black bars that we saw? And how did he resolve this? So even before that whole episode of Lono, Pi'ilani, and Kiha, Pi'ilani comes this, right? Liloa will pass on and leave rulership really in split. The ability to take care of Kū'oko'a goes to Umi, which really means the ability to establish Heiau, which sort of already is saying a lot, yeah? Keeping in mind the Pili episode that they would have well been aware of. And Hakau, who is Liloa's oldest, most sacred-born son. Hakau, as it turns out, doesn't end up being a really great chief. Umi has the backing of Kahuna, has the backing of many of the chiefs of the court. And so they have a quick battle, and he wins. Hakau is dead, but it doesn't mean that he has total control over the island. Chiefs like Imai Kalani of Ka'u and Puna, he's in charge of that area. He doesn't go for that, right? He says, no way, I'm not going to be ruled by this chief who has no ties to my area, has no sense of wanting to take care of my people. Imai Kalani is being a good Ka'u chief, and he's going to say no. Plus, who's this Umi guy? Akanya Kulena, his mother. Yeah, so Imai Kalani is doing the right thing. He's the famed chief who's blind, but is guided by the koloa to know where his enemies are coming from so he can still throw spears and defend himself. So in short, what Umi has is a real big problem on his hands. He has the support of some of the chiefs of the island, and he doesn't have the support of other chiefs. And he can, in this instance, do like what he did in this instance, send Pi'imai Wa'a down and subdue Imai Kalani and put that rebellion to rest. But he doesn't want to keep on doing that over and over and over again. Yeah. So he begins what becomes another pattern of a standard, really, of chiefly behavior, which is to ensure peace through political marriages. And he does so. So he's able to marry these Wahine. You heard about in the other story, the Mahena, Mokuahua, Leia Kea. And that's Maikai during his era. So he then has complete control over the island, especially through his alliances that he's created through these marriages. And it was a brilliant solution, rather than going to war over and over again and constantly having his rule contested. This also would establish his heirs with solid grounding to rule, coming from these mothers. Only problem is, in the generations to come, you set out, you see the situation for a really contentious context. If you know anything about the E chiefs and what will become the Keawe chiefs and the Mahi chiefs, they're all descendants of Umi through different mothers, yeah, who are from different regions, who therefore bear sons who are loyal most to those regions. Hence you have the Mahi lineage of Kohala, the Keawes and the Epus of Kona, and the E's of Hilo. These sons have the resources of their home areas, the backing of their home areas, the allegiance to the home areas, and among them, they have to figure out who's going to rule. And so it kicks off this whole era on Hawaii Island of instability. So a lot of those red and black bars, really, if you look at the mo'olelo, they kind of start over there. And when they don't, the patterns are very similar. Like on Oahu, Kalei Manuia and her keiki, it's kind of a parallel pattern to this. Okay, so what do they do? Cool, yeah. So what were our kupuna who were, well, maybe I shouldn't say kupuna because I wouldn't consider these guys too high ranking for me to call them kupuna, but what were they trying to do? They were trying to avoid war. Yeah. These heiau are often attempts to avoid rather than engage in war. Here, another way that they're stemming the gray bars, the black bars, the internal aggression, is that if you're Umi, rather than having all of your guys kind of putting all of their energy into thinking about warring one another, get them involved in heiau building. I often wonder if Ahua Umi, all of those big Ahu up in the central area of the island, right? Okay, yeah, let's concentrate on what today. Not making war. Let's focus on our akua. Okay, guys, akua. Everybody, let's build these things. And it keeps everybody occupied for a long time and focused on something other than, strife. So a lot of that was going on. Interesting, yeah? Enter in our role. Yeah, Wahine had a huge say in what was going on politically, enormous. And this is evidence of that, enormous say in what was going on. So if a chief wanted to excel or even survive, you needed to have the mana that Wahine is going to bring you and everything that comes with her. Particularly if she's from another island. One of these Wahine, imagine the beauty of this one Wahine. Klanikaulele Yaivi. Yeah, she was like the mother of mothers in the chiefing world. So her mother is Keakealani Wahine. Her father is Kane Kauaivilani, and she will be a Wahine of. Okay, let me make sure I get this right. Okay, Kū'oko'a mahi. And Kū'oko'a, both Hawaii Island chiefs. Ka'ulahea, a mo'i of Maui. Lono i Kahaupu, who's the High Chief of Kauai. So in the later generations, sort of in order to establish your standing, you have to show your connection to this one Wahine. She becomes really important through time, as do many other of the Wahine. Let me go into this story. Okay. Oh, this one's really hard. But, okay, let's just try it fast. Keikolike, here he is. He, toward the end of his reign, raids Kū'oko'a. Now, at the time, Alapa'i Nui is in charge, and Alapa'i has to seek revenge for that, of course. Yeah, defend your people. You can't let them get away with that. So he's going over to Maui. By the way, that's that moment when Kamehameha is born. Yeah, I remember Alapa'i had all of his troops assembled at Hokuiki. Anyway, so that's a side. Different story happening, overlapping with this one. So he's being born, all that's going on. But in the meantime, Alapa'i does make it to Maui. And when he gets there, they hear that, oh, Keikolike has just died. I don't really know about that. I think they just kind of hid him out somewhere. But Keikolike very brilliantly decides that rather than putting his, the person that everyone probably thought would be ruling after him, Kuhinapapa in charge, he puts in charge Kamehameha Nui. Kamehameha Nui is the next ali'i nui after Keikolike. Now kind of analyze this and figure out why. What's the factor that's holding this together? Kaleniko Lele'iaiwi, yeah, who's mother to both of these people. Alapa'i Nui, who's coming over to raid Keikolike, but Keikolike was smart. He set himself up. He had more than one wahine out known. One of his wahine is Kuhinapapa Nui, who is the daughter of Kaleniko Lele'iaiwi, which makes her the half-sister of Alapa'i. So when Alapa'i finds out that Kamehameha Nui is in charge, oh, they have a huge celebration. It's one big aha'ina on Maui. Brilliant. That would not have happened if not but for the fact that this had been lined up for generations. At this time, you have the guys from Moloka'i arriving on the scene. And they are concerned because, sorry, I'm waiting. They're concerned because the chiefs of Maui, sorry, let me see it here. They need the help of the chiefs of Maui because they just got raided by Oahu. Molokai chiefs raided by Oahu, they're seeking help from Maui. The Maui guys say, sorry, we just finished raiding Hawaii. We're kind of chula. Maybe not today. And then enter in Alapa'i. Alapa'i says, we're ready. Because remember, they were ready for a war and they didn't have one, right? So they're like, good to go. Plus now, keep in mind that Keawe, this is Keawe, had married Kanealai, who was the ruling chiefess of Molokai. So these guys who are coming here at this time to ask for help, yeah, are actually cousins to Alapa'i Ma. So Alapa'i folks say, oh yeah, sure, because we get you guys. So they go to Molokai, Alapa'i Ma, Molokai Ma, and they win in that battle, yeah? Let me make sure I get the right sheet. Oh yes, Kapi'o Hokalani. So it's Ku'oko'a who raided from Oahu on Moloka'i. So they killed Ku'oko'a, which means that on Oahu, the person in charge there is a child, Ku'oko'a's son, Kamaho'kalani. The Moloka'i guys, the Hawaii Island guys say, opportunity. Yeah? Oahu must be in complete chaos right now. They're trying to figure out who's who, what's what. The ruling chief just died. They just lost the battle on Moloka'i. Let's continue on to Oahu. Now the reason for this, why they're kind of not just calling it a day and going back home, is because for Alapainui, one of the big problems of the day is that we have a lot of chiefs, high-ranking chiefs. Remember, you married all these Wahine, and you had really high-ranking children. You need to give them maikai lands to rule over. You don't want to give them like little small place, because their standing requires that they have a bigger kuleana. And so you're looking for new lands to allow them to be good rulers. As you train them, they're high-ranking, you need to give them good lands. So really, what was the agenda for Alapa'i guys is to go to Oahu and have a place for their new chiefs to be ruling over. So they go over there, and you have then an opportunity for them to take over these rich lands of Oahu, yeah? Ka'onohi o Kapakipika. Oahu is really that, it's so rich. This island is so rich, and it was always known to be that. And this is why Alapa'i arrives, but he does not expect Peleoholani to be here from Kauai. So Kauai and Oahu, through time, they're really peeling. Those are very, very tight genealogies. So Peleoholani is really a ruling chief of Oahu and Kauai in many ways, and he hurries back to Oahu and says, okay, I'm going to get things all in order, not to worry. Oahu, you guys are well cared for. So what you have assembled here are the best warriors of Kauai, Oahu, Moloka'i, probably some guys from Maui are there too, I would imagine, really, and Hawaii. None of them expected to face each other that day. The Kauai and Oahu guys are just trying to get the island together. They're not ready for a big war. They don't want to be fighting. And these guys from Hawaii, they thought it was going to just be easy, just come in, cruise in. They don't want to be involved in the battle. Na'ili finds a way for everything to be maikai. And they probably all knew about this, but Na'ili is the one to enact it. Okay, let's get all the players together. Here's Na'ili. Here's Peleoholani, Alapa'i, and as you can see, who is the key person in this mix? That Wahine up there. Kamaka'i Moku. Who is she to all of them? Sister to Na'ili, Wahine to both Peleoholani and Alapa'i. And not just a Wahine, but a Wahine who bears children to both of those men. Keep in mind that Kalani'o Pu'u is the war general of, if you look at this, you would think Peleoholani, but he's actually the war general of Alapa'i. Because Kamaka'i Moku is really a Hawaii island chief. She was just cruising on Oahu the time that she hooked up with Peleoholani. So Kalani'o Pu'u is raised on Hawaii Island. He's part of Alapa'i's court, as is Kū'oko'a, who is also a child of Kamaka'i Moku. So here are the two war generals, Kalani'o Pu'u and Kū'oko'a of Alapa'i. And we have Na'ili there pointing out to everyone, hey, let's remember who we all are here. And they, no doubt, knew this well. It was an opportunity for all of them to honor their relationships. And again, at this point in time, at Noneala'a, there is established that peace and understanding that everyone will continue to rule their respective islands, and that they will just get together and have a nice diplomatic visit. So, and that's how that day ended. So you really have a situation where generations of careful planning for what could be a possibility and seeding the situation in ways that allows for many good options. And well, let me pause there. But just take a look at this. It's just amazing. It's really amazing. And it was because of their understanding of relationships. We talk about, oh, relationships are so important. Well, they are. And the kind of understanding that R.E. had of these relationships and creation of those relationships on purpose made all the difference. All right, you know what, let me end there. There's more, but I want to get you guys talking. So, what are some of the things that you folks are seeing? You remember that initial image, right? I showed those triangles, and then all the triangles together emerged some new pictures, yeah? What are some of the things that you folks are seeing from all of this? What are the new ideas you have of Wahine that you didn't have coming into the door today?
I loved your graph on internal and external battle. I've never seen that before. That's really.
Well, I had to do that only because you cannot keep it in your head, yeah? So not like these Kahuna who had their entire lifetimes and this superior intelligence to be able to hang on to all of that. But I don't count. So that's just a way to kind of organize it and see the pattern where my brain couldn't pick it up otherwise. I think their brains could, because they thought that way. Their brains could pick up those patterns and understand what was going on. But yeah, I need help. So even like this, right? I don't think they did this in the sand. But how did they hang on to this? Okay, let's see what's that. But they did. So that kind of, that sense of brilliance is just beyond me. Other thoughts?
Two things. One, when does human sacrifice come in?
Oh, that's way back at Kuhinapapa.
Kuhinapapa.
And really, you can tell like a pro-chief kind of person, but it's not, there's a lot of capital punishment that still exists in this world, right? Think about the fact that we didn't have prisons, we didn't have human cages, and one of the reasons is that people took these rules very seriously. You didn't need to have prisons for the people who were, let me try again. You didn't have to cage up that person who wasn't staying in line. You wouldn't play with the system. It's a harsh thing, and it's not something that I think we would want to reenact, but it worked. It worked. But sorry, go ahead, share your manao, because I know that that's something that, there's two sides to that clearly. What do you think?
Well, there's a book by Manola Duke as in Indian. She says that some of the older societies, which are more female-based, don't have that kind of warfare. Yeah. In fact, to actually kill somebody is wrong. Yeah. You're able to kill them, to tell them that I can if I had the choice, but it's wrong to take a life. That's what they don't. In other words, they go through battles, but they step back at that moment of killing. So that's what I'm trying to find out here, too. The second question I have is, with the Mo'i Wahine, Kuhinapapa, yeah. So tell us a little bit about that.
Throughout this, there's about maybe, I want to say 8 or so ruling chiefesses, and they really ruled like any other chiefess or chief. They were engaged in human sacrifices. In fact, the ones in Hawaii were pretty, like Cap Mahana. Oh, she was mean.
Not on a wall.
Kalei Manuia. In fact, You know who's more famous? I wish I knew his name right off the top of my head, but it's Kalemunui's husband, who's known to have not sought the human sacrifice in the case of offenders. There's a story about how these guys who stole something, some food, are brought to him, and the punishment that he gives them is to make them eat and eat and eat and eat, and that was his punishment, or their punishment. So, Kalaimanu, actually, and here's another one, my favorite chief of all time, Ma'ili Pukahi. He was known never to use human sacrifice. So yeah, there are pockets throughout this that don't need to, and that choose not to.
I think one thing, if you contrast what you presented, sometimes we think you have to be very strategic about military warfare, but yet I think what you've proven is that you have to be incredibly strategic to try and be peaceful. And we oftentimes don't equate those things of high caliber strategy to be peaceful.
Awesome. Yes, yes, yes. Go ahead.
No, and I think sometimes when we talk about human sacrifice, we just think that, they were grabbing people and
random kind of.
There are all kinds of different ways and different degrees in which that was handled, right? I mean, we have where they would be killed in war, and that then they would be sacrificed. I mean, there's all different kinds of ways. So I don't think that was like one way that they would just be practicing that.
Yeah, absolutely. Really, they're the egregious lawbreakers oftentimes. And when you try read Malo and Kū'oko'a, when they talk about that, like who are the sacrifices? They talk about lawbreakers, yeah? Those people who, Hehe and all of those couples, those are the people that that they call out as the ones who are being sacrificed. As well as Kawa, and that's a whole other thing that's like shrouded in hard to understand stuff. And I don't know enough and feel competent enough to even try. Nene.
Going back to the early migrations of the chiefs to Hawaii, how was it that our chiefly system as we know it today emerged as opposed to the more clan-based systems in Samoa and Aotearoa? So I've always wondered that.
I would credit that to Ma'ili Kukahi. He's the one who establishes the Kū'oko'a system, yeah? And it's coming off of the heels of Kalaunui Ohua coming over here. So the generation before, Kalaunui Ohua is here. He captures Huapolele, who's the ruling chief of one of the three, and this is why here's where the answer comes in. Oahu, through that migrations period, was most of the time divided up into three nations. So just like we think of different nations across the Pai'aina, Oahu itself had three. And Huapolele, when Kalaunui Ohua comes through from Hawaii Island, is one of the three. And so Huapolele is taken by Kalaunui Ohua, goes to Kauai, and all of that happens there, and eventually Kalaunui Ohua, it's not successful, and Huapolele comes back. But the lesson learned for Oahu is that we need a stronger defense against that. And so the ahali'i of Oahu elects, and see, if we had 5 hours here, there's all sorts of, fine tuning of this, all of these stories are just dripping with ha'awina for us. So way back in the time of Ma'ili Kukahi, right up here he is. So he's in generation 10 of this 23 chronology. The ahali'i, at that time, they elect Haka, who's the highest ranking of them. And Haka doesn't do a very good job. Sorry, I'm getting into the story without making the point here. So Oahu pulls together the island under one chief, Haka. And they do that through the election that's happening at the Aha'ula and the Ahali'i. That kind of sets up the precedent for centralized, big, layered governance. So you have those big ali'aimoku kinds of chiefs over a region.
Oh, I see.
yeah, already. That's seated. Now enter in when Ma'ili Kū'oko'a takes over from Haka. And they do this through the killing of only one person, Haka. Haka ends up holding up in a fortress at Ukavivi in Wahine, on the Wahine Mountains. And there, Ma'ili Kū'oko'a's forces come up, and at that fortress, late at night, they were going to storm in, only to find that the guards are saying, like, come on in, help you guys stop. Start feeding us. We're all starving over here. Lesson 1, feed your people. So yeah, so in that time, Haka was the only one who was killed. Ma'ili Kū'oko'a is put in charge, and he then sets up that Kū'oko'a system, where now instead of just having the big regional layer, we have all of the localized governance. And that's the brilliance of what Ma'ili Kū'oko'a did, was that you have localized governance where there's somebody who's really tied to that area, knows it like the back of his hand, knows all the people, knows all the nuances of, you know, the way the river going to flow, when you get big rain, when you get low rain, all the, you know, little details of, you know, when the anai come through, et cetera, and it's that localized governance that leads to real high productivity when paired with the regional and centralized sort of system. And then there's all sorts of stuff. Like by the time Loni Makahiki institutes Makahiki, you have then a distribution of resources so that when this Kū'oko'a might have a whole lot of excellent aha, the circuit allows the chief to take that aha to other areas, distribute it along the way. Meanwhile, he's picking up other kinds of things that this Kū'oko'a is going to eventually get. Yeah, so there's all sorts of brilliance going on that's just amazing.
Hello, Mike came up from the next section to get ready. So if there are other questions, maybe we can take them outside.
Okay.
Sorry.
Mahalo, you guys! They still come out as the highest leaders. What happened and how did this happen? And that starts to speak to sort of that brilliance that I want to share. So, what were the factors? When Pa'awatini come here, Kū'oko'a and many others all attest to the fact that at the time, because the other chiefs had sort of intermingled a lot with the Mokainana, there was a real blurring of authority. And so the sense of leadership wasn't very clear, especially among one another, chief to chief. How do we hold ourselves accountable to one another? It wasn't that clear as they were in the midst of trying to figure things out. Well, one of the things that they adopted was kind of like a Hawaiian invention, so to speak, and that's the ahali'i. The ahali'i was, in fact, starting already on Maui. This guy Haho was already going for it with the ahali'i. And so Haho, who's a contemporary of Pa'awatini, sets up this console. So an ahali'i is where, sorry, aloha you guys. Oh, thank you. Sorry. So I'll keep it letting put on to burn. Good thing had when you let me earlier.
No, not really.
Are we good? Are we open? Okay. We're good. Because Kapi'ioho Kalani of Oahu had just raided Molokai and was about to take over Molokai. So these guys from Molokai are coming over, and these would be Ha'oma. Kane'alaiza Wahine, who had ruled on Molokai, and she had a child, Ha'o, with Keawe Kahiri Moku. And so these guys are now coming over to Maui and saying, hey, Maui cousins, come help us, please, we need help. Because Kupi'ioho Kalani of Oahu is trying to take our island over. Maui guys are saying, oh, sorry, no can, they just raided Kona and Kohala not that long ago, so they're kind of spent. But our Hawaii guys are ready to go because they were going to go anyway, right, on Maui? And so they're all raring to go, okay, let's go. So they go to Molokai, and they win that battle, and they figure, okay, they're on a roll. thinking about Oahu, they know that Oahu must be sort of in chaos right now because Kapi'iohokalani just died in the Gawa Moloka'i. His son, Kanahokalani, is only, 5, 6, young. And so all the chiefs of Oahu are probably trying to figure out among themselves who's who, what's what. So things Alapa'i guys. So they head over to Oahu. Now the reason they didn't just call it a day on Moloka'i and go back home is because for Alapa'i at this time, one of the main stresses and one of the reasons for all those black and gray bars is that a lot of high-ranking chiefs don't have high-ranking kuleana. And so because there's so many of them, they had all of these wives, right? They have lots of high-ranking chiefs and not enough really awesome lands to let them rule over. So there's a pressure to try and find them good lands to rule over. And Ka'onohio Kapaki Pika or Ahune is a really great place to be. So they're thinking, okay, right on, if our chiefs can come over here and establish put a rule over Oahu, maybe the Oahu guys will come to like us and they'll all be my ka'i. Well, when Alapa'i comes here, it's a whole different story. Because, Oahu guys, they got their act together too. As soon as they heard word of things going bad on Moloka'i, they hurried up and got word to their cousins on Kauai. Peleoholani arrives. He's actually, he would equally stand as a ruler on Kauai or Oahu because of his lineage, right? And so Peleoholani comes with all the Kauai battalions to Oahu and is ready to defend Oahu upon the arrival of Alapa'i. So here they stand at Noneala'a, Neankana'ehe, and you have the armies of Moloka'i, Hawaii, Oahu, and Kauai ready for battle, but not really, because that's not what they wanted, none of them, right? So the Kauai guys came here to help Oahu kind of get its act together, make sure they're Maikai, and Moloka'i and Hawaii guys thought they're just going to cruise in and kind of just, but that wasn't the case for any of them. So enter Na'ili into the situation to offer a diplomatic way out. Created by, again, Wahine. Let's take a look here. So here's Alapa'i. Here's Peleoholani. Na'ili, who's the high chief of Wai'anae. And they are looking at each other that day, hearing what Na'ili has to say about, so let's enjoy this time to bring together our different houses because we have so much to celebrate and so much to share, and we have so many ties. Let us all enjoy this diplomatic visit to Oahu. And in fact, it's true because what do they share? What do Peleoholani and Alapa'i share? Their relationship with Kamaka'i Moku. More than that, Kamaka'i Moku bore children by both of them. So they are punalua to one another. And in fact, Peleoholani's own child, Kuhinapapa, is raised on Hawaii Island under Alapa'i's court. Because Kamaka'i Moku is actually a Hawaii Island chief. She was just cruising on Oahu when she hooked up with Peleoholani. So Kuhinapapa is a Hawaii Island chief. So Peleoholani is in fact the father of Alapa'i's war general, Kalani Oku'u. The other war general that Alapa'i is coming on is Kū'oko'a, who also is a child of Kamaka'i Moku. So, this is why things ended as they did, with just a peaceful diplomatic visit. And cool too, of course, Na'ili's role and why he can stand there in between all of them is that he is Kamaka'i Moku's brother. So, very appropriate. But that peace that day at Noneala'a could never have been achieved if not but for kind of strategic, planful, purposeful relationship building. These meetings and arrangements and diplomatic visits Kū'oko'a wasn't here just because she thought it would be fun to visit Oahu. There were purposeful reasons for her really being here for a diplomatic stay. They wanted a child to be born of this time when Kū'oko'a would be here on Oahu, because those ties could come in handy. Yeah? Those ties would matter, and they might be honored one day in a way that would save us all, as this time at Naneala'a. So, maybe this is a good place to pause. There's more, but let's just funny this at this point. What are the kinds of relationships that we're establishing today? Yeah. And how are we looking at our relationships? Are we looking at our relationships in these sort of ways? And this time, it's such a wonderful opportunity right now where we have all of these incredible wahine really right here in front of us, all these ties that we're rekindling, that we're making more pa'a. Are we thinking about things in this sort of way? And can we, should we? How do we do this in our modern context? So maybe just thoughts, mana'o on that. Or any of the other kinds of patterns that you saw that we talked about. Any, just opening up the floor to mana'o. What are you folks' thoughts as we think about these things? Different ways of looking, yeah. We hadn't thought about this kind of stuff. Because I agree. I've not seen this in this sort of way. Ideas, mana'o?
Relationships like that nowadays wouldn't work. I think there would be too much pinakia.
What are just like we have heiau metaphors today that kind of serve the same purpose? Are there kinds of things that we can do that are analogous to this, sort of a metaphor of this? And in fact, are we doing some of that already?
We do this already.
Yeah.
I mean, just establishing, who are you from, who's your grandparents, or, so this is, it's important to know who you're from, where you're from. I mean, in that light, we do it every day, and that helps establish, who you're gonna, your resources around. I mean, we do it all the time. Maybe hula, we call on the hula people, we call on the la'au people. Like for my alana this morning, I need you to call people who will get you work right there. And I needed it today. So, we're doing the things that are needed, and it's just part of our makeup. We do these things.
Yeah.
We monitor our relationships. We we hang out with these people because we want to learn more about this. We stay away from maybe those people because we don't want that action. So we do all the time in our social, in our friendships, in our cousinships. I mean, organization of our family events, of our like this. So I think we still in practice.
Yeah. We are doing a lot of it, yeah.
I 100% agree with Penny. An important point to make because it connects us with our kukuna and our ali'i. But my question is, what is this challenging us to do as well? What can we learn from it? Right?
That's a great
so when
question.
I think going back to the metaphor of the heiau, and I agree 100% that our issues are a lot of what make up this heiau building, right? And so if we have someone that we're in conflict with, especially when it comes to these issues of us as a people, and we're trying to organize as a people to that level that shows, look what we can do, I think that, I have so much to think about after this presentation, but the first thing that comes to mind is that we malama our relationships so much to the extent that they are going to override political conflicts that we have as a lahui within our lahui. As there's always a line to cross at some point, but really sometimes I think we cross those lines so quickly because the relationship's not there. So it's easy to cross lines and cut ties and stuff like that because there's no relationship in the first place. So I'm thinking about uniting and all that kind of stuff as a people.
I think that's one of the things that I'm going to take away from this. It's really challenging to malama those relationships so we can build that heiau and increase our power.
Yeah, who's our kamakaimoku? Who's our nikaulele yubi? Yeah. And even, you know, seeding, I think about what would it be like if our top pull of our organizations kind of cross, you know, have those sort of diplomatic visits, so to speak, like how Lani Kamakahiki visited Kuhinapapa. What is that all about, and what comes up of that? What are the, you know, what are the children that come of those sort of ties, you know, that bind those two groups together, or those two families together, or you know. Other mana'o.
So just in just a comparison to mine, I was looking at how as the subsequent generations of the Li'i went on, there were fewer and fewer prime resources that could be divided among them. And so in today's context, I think we need, as Wahine, to be maka'ala about being careful not to divide our resources and then covet what other people have. Trying to figure out ways to multiply them or to grow them so that there's more of the pie rather than trying to figure out how we divide the pie amongst each other, because I think that's no way. And I think that eventually we'll end up fighting and losing track of what's really important for our people. And so rather than trying to think that you have that and I have this and you can't have that and your kids can never have that, we should try to figure out how we can multiply those things.
Awesome, yeah. While you were talking, it reminded me about that field system that we talked about, because that's a real late invention, so to speak. It comes really late in time, like, you know, probably it's probably Umi and beyond that it started at. And that, yeah, how do we look at new resources instead of like what you're talking about, yeah, fighting over what little there is, to go out and create a new source of abundance. Other challenges that all of this makes us think about, or other solutions that this makes us think about?
I think for us at OHA, it's an exciting time because we have a leader that has really strong relationships in various communities that we haven't had before, and then now we're bringing on people like you who have really strong relationships with other organizations and other heads of organizations, and I feel like really excited about how we're moving forward and building our relationships with Meme schools and, you know, Kū'oko'a, and then our other organizations, like the leaders that are in this room, are the people that are educating our children and keeping our people healthy and feeding our communities. So that's how I see this being relevant for the Lahui moving forward. It's an exciting time.
Yeah. How do we build the mega heiau with everybody? Yeah.
Very, very true. And then I think one of the key points we are talking about too is like, how do we make sure that there's room for everybody? Yeah, because like in my own ohana, everybody, ask Lenny girl, she's gonna give the name to the Vic. Ask Lenny girl, she's gonna do the pudding. You know, but how do I empower my cousins that they have a role too, and that they have every right to a one-on-one, don't always depend on the ku'ana. You know, so I think those kinds of things, and how do we kind of mana that out into our own ohana? Because sometimes, like just in our own circle, every teacher I hang out with, she's either the one in her ohana who does all the stuff, right? So how do we mana that out to the rest of our cousins?
How do we create that ahali'i? Yeah. Everybody's got kuleana and spread it out.
And I guess part of that comes with like, not even, no, you can, and this is all. And then go, yeah, and that, but these kinds of is the way, you know, like I was talking to me on the way, oh, this is so awesome because I don't know half the people here. This is awesome because this means it's bigger than just us. Yeah. And which are your moms, so your moms who just you and your 8 titas. So this is more, our capacity is really, that's an awesome.
Yeah, I got plenty of us who look like Guam. Yeah.
Right? Absolutely.
I know the time is probably over already, and sorry, any last thoughts before we close out?
For dispelling the myths.
Yeah, no.
in this presentation with, you know, it's just like, I'm going off of one, you know, but it's spelling out all the Kuhinapapa with strategizing, thinking, going beyond, what about the future, how we're going to manage this kind of thing, but it's very relevant now.
Our chiefs strategized for peace. They often did. Hallelujah falls first. Sorry, it's time to kind of restart. And the stuff that we covered, I'm going to be able to go faster. If you look at all of the mo'olelo, mo'oha, mele, there's this era in the beginning that's really incredible, and these are those cosmogonic genealogies that we hear about, you know, Kumuliko and many others. The time that I'm looking at for this presentation is much later, and this period, beginning kind of when the later chiefs start migrating here, the later migratory period, something shifts in that time, and it is right about the time of Kuhinapapa, those guys, Hapo Ano, Mabeke, Apu, the Puna family on Kauai, followed quickly after by Mo'okeha. It's right around that era when things switch in the way you start hearing about what's coming through in the mo'olelo. Everything's a lot more specific. You have real detailed information about this chief was born here, his Ieve was buried here, here's his mele inoa, and this was his heiau, and that kind of detail that you don't get earlier. And so when you start looking here, for me there was enough information that I could start seeing different patterns that were just amazing. So this era is what you see over here, and I'm passing around a paper out there that kind of shows it. So when you see it up close, there's Kauai, Oahu, Maui, and Hawaii that have that real clear record. And I'm not trying to ignore all the other important mokupuni, but these are the ones that have real clear information. And we think about how oftentimes, Kamehameha, you go out Kahiko, and Kamehameha is really like just yesterday kind of. He's way over here in this in this generation. Okay.
What years are you talking about, you know?
Oh, you had to ask that. I like to talk in generations because it's hard to know really what year we're talking about. So, you know, so mid-1700s, Kamehameha is born. And so that gives you a place in time there. And whether you want to count generations as 20 years each, 30 years each, you know, but then you can kind of.
Your time here is being truncated, so it confuses it more.
Yes. So we're looking at it, you mean because we're focusing on that zone.
Yeah.
So for this, you know, when you look at it just visually, and this is why I wanted to show visuals, just visually, you can see that this time period here includes a whole lot of people. Yeah, these are all the rulers in the 23 generations for the four major island units. Yeah. I hope you can kind of see that it's no small time period we're talking about. Yeah, 23 generations. Just kind of let that kind of sit in you. That's a lot of time. So, where do we get it from? Well, these kahuna who were in charge of keeping all the mo'oha and mo'olelo mele, very incredible. I cannot even fathom how they were able to do it. They're, you know, of course, trained from a young time. And so when they got to be kahuna of this sort, think of them as, you know, PhDs times 10. Just the amount of information and not just raw data in their heads, right? Because they had to figure out the relationships. Look at that genealogy chart, right? They would have had to have had that in their heads and been able to figure out the relationships because they needed to be relied upon. When their chief asked them about, well, how, you know, this person's giving me an invitation to go visit him on that island. You gotta know, right? What are all the ways I'm connected to this person? What are all the kinds of things, protocols that I might want to be thinking about in honoring or recognizing, or what we have, or should I? Is this a trap or what? You know, you got to know all of these nuances of everything that happened that could affect that new relationship you're developing, and all of that's going to be based on, just like nowadays, right? some shared history. And what is that shared history? So these guys went deep in understanding that shared history. Now, what we've often done is kind of look at mo'olelo and looking at one at a time, and it's amazing, yeah, all kind of richness in one mo'olelo, one mo'oku'aha, or one mere. When you start putting them together, what's cool is that new patterns emerge that you wouldn't have seen unless you start putting them together. And it's in that putting them together that's like, whoa, things are popping out. So what I'm about to do is kind of go into, okay, we talked about this, yeah, that's sorry. What I'm about to go into is looking at, well, what are the traits of ali'i? And think of this section as just, like, I'm just talking about little triangles kind of randomly. Here's a trait, and this is one triangle that we know is like awesome about our chiefs, and another one, and another one. Then later on, I'm going to try start to put them together and point out some of those neat big patterns. Okay, so what are the common things we remember about why our chiefs were amazing? Well, a typical Kū'oko'a, yeah? A lot of this wouldn't exist if not but for the leadership of our ali'i, whether a konadiki or a higher, ali'i moku or ali'i nui. When we look at something like a lokui'a, it's not something that a single ohana can do by itself. Yeah, it's something that requires that organization and leadership capacity. Same thing with like the awai. A lot of people are working together, and it's our ali'i who bring them together. Through time, what you're going to see is that there's an amazing thing that happens in Hawaii that doesn't happen elsewhere in Polynesia, just like how our kapa is like amazing. For our ali'i, what they did was have both localized leadership at this ahupua'a level. People were leading this ahupua'a who knew that ahupua'a like the back of their hand. And then they had people who knew the region, and yet there was an organization that was even bigger above that centralized overall mokupuni kind of leadership. And that's, you don't see that everywhere else in the Pacific and Polynesia, so it's that kind of multi-layered thing is one of the traits that are very Hawaii. What that allowed our ali'i to do is to create lots of prosperity. Here's an example. Waikiki, like we never get to see it anymore. But this was the most the richest ainohomona ever on Oahu, because it was so much flat land, so much water, so much opportunity for lokui'a. Kalia, where the Hilton is, was all lokui'a before. Lo'ikalo, as far as the eye could see, all the way up through Manoa. That Ulumiu here, planted initially by Kaku'iheva, had 10,000 trees in it at one time. Imagine the capacity of what that could do, yeah. So these were started by these great chiefs. Ma'ilikukahi, Ku'oko'a, Kaku'iheva, they're all involved in bringing this kind of productivity through. This is a dryland field system, the remnants of it in North Kohala. Just this section alone, 12 by 2.5 miles. 12 miles long, 2.5 miles wide, all food. You see the grid pattern? And this is just the Kohala portion. The Kona one is like crazier still. Again, it's not the kind of thing that, you know, my ohana, your ohana, hey, let's make a field system. It's that everybody got to work together, figure out some way to organize this, and yeah. So that's the kind of productivity that was able to happen with the leadership. Our chiefs were known to be very humble as well, often dressing incognito because they wanted to know what was the real scoop. What's going on? What are the people thinking? So as you can see here, Brooke, I think nailed this depiction really well. You can tell who it is, yeah? So there was an occasion where all these things were needed to be brought up from Kū'oko'a towards Waimea. And so he helps to hawai all of that. talking story with this to investigate, hey, so how's the chiefs in this area? How are they treating these folks? And how about their Kamehameha? How is he? And Tutu is not really onto him, but Keiki is. So very, very humble. Yeah, they were always walking with their people, defending their people. So here's Kiha Pi'ilani in the foreground in a battle against Lonoa Pi'ilani. If you know that Mo'olelo comes from Maui, right? So after Pi'ilani passes on, two brothers, Lonoa Pi'i is put in charge, but he's not really that maika'i, so Kiha Pi'ilani goes to get some support from Umi Aliloa, who's on the far right. Now this is where our Wahine role, and I was going to try to pop in where Wahine come into play. Very critical. Establishing the rule on Maui under Kiha Pi'ilani may never have happened if not but for the support of Crucial Wahine in this picture, and that is Pi'ikea. Pi'ikea is the sister of Lono and Kiha, and she evaluates the situation and determines that indeed Kiha is the one who should be ruling. So by putting her support behind Kiha, she gets Umi in the picture because she is married to Umi and is living now on Hawaii Island. So with Pi'ikea's support, Umi and Kiha are able to overtake Lono and bring Maui back under Kama rule. So defending our people when our rulers, aren't, there's the accountability in the picture too. We know who this is, yeah? There he is. Physical prowess, that's another. Again, I kind of doing just those random traits of Hawaii that we think of. Physical prowess and being able to display that, whether at the front line in a battle, helping to carve a kanu, take care of weeding a lo'ikalo. All of these things our chiefs were willing to do. And there are many mo'olelo of our best chiefs getting in there and doing it. Okay. Balancing that with being patrons of the arts, being involved in compositions and the sharing or the engagement themselves in hula. This is at Alele in Kailua at the home of Kuhinapapa. His home was called Pamua. And he was Mr. Ho'okipa. All the chiefs from the different islands would love to go here. This is the party house. But really, which was one of the, again, what I'm trying to spotlight here, these gems of their behavior, right? Hospitality to the hilt, and being the patron that ensures that these sort of arts are vibrant and practiced and enjoyed. So his home at Pamua was a place where everyone from, Lone Kama'uki to, and then he's from Big Island to chiefs from Kauai would all come and gather and enjoy. Speaking of being a patron of the arts. Here's Kiawi Kaheri Ilkamoku and Nonama'i Kanaka, his Wahine, with their child, Lenimui Yamamao. So you can guess what is being chanted here. Nothing less than a kumulipo. This was done at the behest of Kiawi Kaheri Ilkamoku. So, these incredible works of art, works of science, like the kumulipo, may never have been in place if not for the kind of support that the chiefs afforded to make that happen. So that the poets who created that, they didn't have to worry about whether they're gonna, have to, how they're gonna eat and where they're gonna live and all of that kind of stuff. That was all taken care of them, and they could focus on doing this 100% of the time. And of course, whenever I talk about a single ali'i, I'm just think of the name that I'm saying as short for Kamehameha Ma. Yeah, it's really a whole set of people. So one of the most important traits of our ali'i is that they surrounded themselves with a core and then a wider circle and a wider circle of people they could rely upon. And they worked with them, constantly calling in that expertise and relying upon that and trusting that, really. And that was one of the traits that Kuhinapapa was really well known for, seeking that advisorship and paying attention to it. Okay, so now, those are just some random traits, but let's try and put together some of the picture that starts to emerge when you're looking at putting together mo'olelo. So when you start reading those migratory mo'olelo, you realize that, oh wow, there's a lot of kind of potential conflict in the air when these Nana'ulu and Ulu chiefs come, because there's land that's really Maika'iloa, like imagine Waipi'o and Halawa, Moloka'i, and places like that. And then there are places like Kauai, where, oh, awesome for other reasons, but really harder, yeah, it's harder. So now who's gonna get what kind of aina? And so there is that stress. And at this point, there's not a kind of kahua ukuni, that foundation of what the governance is gonna be like. I mean, at this time, there's not even such a thing as feather cloaks, no more ahu'ula. No, there's not kahili. All those kinds of things we think about don't exist. And this, in this era, is when that ahali'i emerges, as I was mentioning. Haho on Maui, he invents, so to speak. And it would have been like maybe a room just like this, filled with ali'i. And in this ahali'i, the brilliance of it was that everyone had to know their Kū'oko'a help, thereby kind of establishing in the room whose rank is higher relative to one another, and thereby kind of determining who got what say. And that afforded everyone some organization that didn't exist before. And so when, so those are the two genealogies, yeah. So when you get to the point where Pa'ao and Pili are here and they're adopting that, they take that then even a step further. Not only are we going to do that, but now this affords us a way to be accountable to one another. So in this ka'ina, if Pili is the top person, he's now accountable for the behavior of everybody under him. And they're accountable to one another. And so it forms a situation where ultimately, makainan are better taken care of. And it's this key thing that allowed for this to be constructed. So Pa'ao and Pili build mo'kini, but close to Upolu, North Kohala. And these pohaku came from as far as Pololu, 10 miles as the eel would fly. But the real terrain for us would be like this. It's up and down, valley after valley after valley. Now what does Heiau building have to do in Pa'ao and Pili and kind of establishing their rulership? Well, let's think about it. The walls are over here like 30 feet wide, 20 feet tall, and I don't know if you can get a sense, oh, this is like 200 feet. How huge is this? What is the impression you get of the people who built this? They can work together. There's a lot of them. Patience. They're organized. I mean, just imagine feeding the crew that's working.
Hierarchy.
That alone, there's hierarchy.
They believe in what their whole goal is, and they believe in their leader. Because you can't get people to do something and they don't believe in, or they don't believe in it.
And so cool because we're, you know, on top of all of that, right? So cool, where are they focusing their energies? Spirituality. So imagine, I mean, exactly everything you guys are seeing. Amazing. So if you're looking at it and you're one of the chiefs on the other side, the Nana'ulu guys, what do you think about these guys?
They have an army.
If they were doing something else, like waging war, don't mess with them. Yeah, exactly. Don't mess with them. And so that sense of accountability was what Kū'oko'a says was something that they really, the Makainana appreciated, that things were, the house was in order better. And so they supported Pili. And as a result, he doesn't engage in battles. He's able to establish his leadership on that island, and then that his, all of his descendants become the ruling line of Hawaii Island. There's, like later on, like 5 generations later, there's some Kiukiwe Kalapana and Kamaiole, but for the most part, it's a straight shot from Pili all the way down to Kamehameha. Okay, so let's pause here for a little time to talk. So what about today? What are our heiau? Because this would have been the symbol for Ka'au and Pili of what their people can do, yeah? And how focused they are on something that's important to them. What are our heiau today? And I don't mean for everybody to have to answer it now, because that's kind of a hard question, but
Our heiau today, for me, our heiau today is a focal point for many of us, because now what we're doing is, before it was don't touch, and a lot of times it's because maybe it wasn't, or our kupuna may not have known what it was, but we had to respect everything that was back there. But we are beginning to understand our ethnographies, we know our stories, we can point out to where they are, but we are fighting for them. They've become a focal point of us to fight for. That when development is coming, we will stand up and we will fight for those spaces. So that's what it is.
And what about the
women.
metaphoric
Our
notion of the
women.
heiau? Huh?
Our women.
Our women will stand up and fight. What do you mean?
Our women are, if you look at the success of a lot of our Hawaiian women, it's a representation of the continuity of us as a people and the strength of our people. So metaphorically, I would say our women.
I also think that metaphorically, the heiau of today are the issues that face Native Hawaiians. Political issues, all of the various things that Native Hawaiians are facing today, because those are the things that pull people together.
So when 500 people show up to the Capitol, that's a
With their
heiau,
palms.
so to speak. Yeah. Like the pastime, right? If we have 10,000 of those Imana Kaleo shirts out there in the world, and you bump into them all the time, what message are you getting if you're a politician?
Yeah, all the red shirts walking down Kū'oko'a Avenue.
All the red shirts, that's a better example, all right. Yeah, so, and how do we do these kinds of things so that we can show that we are organized, we got our act together, and as leaders, and I'm looking in this room and I'm so humble because there's so many incredible leaders in this room. What are the heiau that any of you are building, so to speak? Yeah, what are those metaphoric heiau? Okay, so Kuhinapapa got it together. Now, okay, this is kind of getting into a different way of looking at things. So if you look at the mele mo'oku'au, there are certain chiefs that kind of pop out as whole stars, and everybody loves them, and not just a little bit, but plenty. And so this is just a real arbitrary, subjective way that I kind of put out. If this is, the Maweke time, and that's Kamehameha time, here's all the ones that get the hello, big red, but big yellow, among these guys. And when you start reading the Mo'onara Mo'oku'au more, this pattern, at least, if you take a lot of notes and you try to put it all together, this is another layer that emerges. Okay, so what's going on? External aggression, meaning that the one island is going to another island, the gray bars. The black bars are when there's some kind of hakaka going on within the mokupuni. Unfortunately, where do we end up focusing on? A lot of times we talk about our chiefs. Yeah, right over here.
And so it's no wonder that we have some kind of skewed stereotypes. As a point of reference, Liloa will be right in here. Umi and Liloa, Palaimanuia, this kind of golden era is right about in here. Kuhinapapa is a little bit later. Now, when I saw this, I was just so perplexed. Like, okay, why is it going like this? What's happening? Because this isn't random, right? This, you look at that, that's not a random pattern. So what's going on? And when I looked at it more, I realized, oh my gosh, this is why Kū'oko'a says the story at the time that was known, probably most well of all the chiefs by any keiki living at his time was the story of Umi. Because what happened in his time really kind of reset the clock, so to speak. It was different. A lot of things changed. So Umi, his father Liloa, Umi's Hanai Keiki, Mai Wa'a Ma'akamau and Koi.
Can we just take a moment to recognize how hot Umi is? Whoever was the model for that.
And the more you know.
He will be in my
I know. Does she make posters of this?
Yeah. Okay, folks, you guys don't know kind of Makua. Oh boy. No matter right there.
So, as we know, the story goes like this, and you guys know this one, I know. So Liloa passes away, gives the rulership to Hakau, but gives the guardianship of Kūka'ilimoku to Umi, which, given the context of Heiau building and everything, that was already a message, right? It was kind of a message. Okay, if Hakau does well, then mai ka'i, but if not, Umi has the right to go build one Heiau. And as it turned out, Hakau didn't do well. Umi has the support of Kahuna, of Makainamna. He takes out Hakau, becomes the ruler, but he faces a problem. Hence now, kind of the beginning of bringing in those gray and black bars. He faces a problem because his mother is Kuleana, not that high ranking of a chiefess, or maybe some say not at all. And so his rank is lower than some of the other chiefs who remain alive and well in their various regions. And here's Imai Kalani, who's the chief of Kū'oko'a, and he ain't having Umi ruling over him. So he's going to go to war against Umi. Umi sends Pi'imai Wa'a down, subdues this rebellion. Really, it's not a rebellion. Imai Kalani is taking care of Ka'u and Puna because he doesn't really trust that Umi, who was raised on that side, is going to take good care of his people. So he's doing the right thing by his people. But in any case, he gets, that rebellion gets put down, and Umi's thinking, he doesn't want to keep on doing this. This isn't the way to rule, right? It's not the way to do it. So, he does this instead. And it's Maikai for his era because he establishes himself through alliances, right? Alliances through these Wahine. Kapukini, Pi'ikea, Henna, Mokuahualea Kea. And you can see there who they are. So he sets himself up really well, but it seeds the situation for future conflict because, as you guys might realize, in the later generations, you have these guys, the E family, from the Hilo side, and these other Kona chiefs, the Ehu and Kiaves, often aligned to it, the Kohala chiefs, the Mahis. These guys will be in conflict with one another because, of course, they have from their mother's side allegiance to different areas of the island. Yeah? Their mothers come from different areas of the island. They have the resources of the different areas of their island. And they all have equal standing relative to Umi. And so you have this sort of situation where there's reason for conflict. But what are you trying to do about it? Those heiau that we were trying to talk about, trying to see earlier in a different light, heiau as peace creation. A lot of them were trying to do that, to say, hey, let's think about it. Yeah? Do we really want to take on each other? This is what we can do, this is what we can do. Still there was strife. Well, what else were they doing then? Oh. So make no mistake. Make no mistake. Did Ali Wahine have a say in things? Oh yes. Oh yes. And so much so that they were, you know, these women were actively sought after, yeah? So you want to have the mana of this Wahine and that Wahine as a ruling chief. And if you could manage to do that, then that was more mana to you. And he had it there from another island. And why so is because you kind of have a place to go to in case things really go bad. Yeah. And you have a whole fresh source of backing, whether it be hardwood from Oahu's Lihue Plain or people, as in the case of Umi and Kihapi Ilani, you have a whole other island's resources to come to. Specific Wahine will emerge as crucial in this picture. And when we look at how they played out in the different mo'olelo, you see the brilliance of the kinds of relationships that were being established through all of these matings. So if I had to identify one thing that was the most brilliant of all that our Inuit of times past did, is to establish a complex network of relationships that allowed you, when you treated those relationships well, a lot of different options for how you were going to behave in any situation. So here's sort of the mother of all mothers, Kleni Kaulele Yaivi. To give you a sense, so she's, her mother is Keakea Lani Wahine. Her father is Kani Kauaivi Lani. Her maids are Kaua Mahi. So, to Kohala side. Kiavi Kahieli Okumoku. Honadais. Kaulahea of Maui. He's a mo'i of Maui. As well as Loni Kahaupu, who's a high chief from Kauai. See how her role plays out here. So this story kind of starts off with Kikaulike. So you see how Kleni Kaulele Yaivi, she was that woman there. And you see how her impact plays out in this episode with Kekolike. So Kekolike, he's a ruling chief of Maui. He goes to Kona and Kohala raids over there. Alapa Inui is the ruler at the time. He has to take revenge because he can't have that happen and not do something about it. So he goes over to Maui. And so they say Kekolike mysteriously was on his deathbed at that time. I doubt it. They just hid him somewhere. I bet you. And that was smart of him. So Maui says, oh, sorry, he's mucky already. And very wisely, he sets up not who they think will be the ruling chief, his firstborn son from his Maui wife, but rather Kamehameha Nui. And so when Alapa'i comes over, instead of there being a huge battle, there was a great aha'aina and celebration over the new ruling chief. How and why?